Japan. What's not to love about this amazing destination? There's loads of different experiences to be had on a trip to Japan. There's an abundance of history and cultural experiences. You can take in breathtaking landscapes and head into nature, or visit the big bustling cities and be in shopping heaven. One of my absolute #1 criteria for travel is experiencing the food, and boy does Japan have delicious and surprisingly affordable food. Although Japan has just so much to offer, first-time visitors may find planning for a trip to Japan a little overwhelming and they may be a little bit nervous. After 25 plus visits to Japan, I've narrowed down 5 different apps and websites that I still use to make sure I'm able to navigate the transport, deal with the different language, and have an absolutely fantastic time in Japan. I'm going to share those 5 with you for today, and I'm also going to share right at the end an extra bonus one that will not only make transport easier, but will also save you some money. Stay tuned. If you're new to our channel, I'm Tanya. Let's get started with #1 of our 5 tips. So during the last 10 years of my trips to Japan, I've had one website that's my absolute go-to for information of everything around Japan, and that website is japanguide.com. Using this website is super easy. There's a search function in the top right-hand corner, or you can scroll down and use the map to find your destination. You're able to see what there is to see and do, how you can get to those places, what the cost for travel is, and also the thing that I really love to save money is it also tells you what options there are for not only discount passes for transport, but discount passes for entrances. It'll tell you the opening hours for each of the sites, tell you what the entrance fees are. One of my favourite things about using this website is that I can click on a destination such as Tokyo and see not only what there is to do in Tokyo, but also my options for day trips. And after so many visits to Japan, one of the reasons I keep going back to this website is to find things we haven't done before. Using this website, you can plan out a full itinerary at the touch of your fingertips. So that leads me to tip #2. Now, tip #2 I actually use for all of our trips, no matter where we are going, but it's a great tip to use for planning out Japan and having all of the information you need on your phone. So tip #2 is an app that I use. It's also web-based and it's called TripIt. And TripIt is fantastic for storing all of the information for your trip. In the good old days, I can remember I used to print things out, have a folder. In my suitcase was an A4 folder with all of the information we needed for our trip. Thank goodness that technology has come along, and on my phone, everything that I used to print out and carry and weigh down my luggage is now available in my pocket. So how does TripIt actually work? You can set up trips with all of the information that you need. You can enter your flight number and magically the times appear. You can enter your hotel and it has all of the information for most of the hotels that we've stayed at with their addresses and contact details. You can also put in what your itinerary is going to be. This is fantastic when you can link in someone like Simon who does no planning for trips, so he can still log in and see exactly what I've planned for him to do for that day. I have to say, sometimes he doesn't quite like what I've planned. If you're anything like me who likes to plan out their trips as soon as they book it, even if it's 6 months or a year in advance, sometimes I read things that I just won't remember later on. So you can pop notes into there so when it's closer to the time, you can remember these things. One of the things I absolutely love about TripIt is your trips, your past trips, they stay there. So if one of my friends asks me for some advice or a recommendation on what to do, I can go back and have a look and find all of that information for them. So we've talked about where we can find all the information for what to do when we visit to Japan. We've talked about tip number 2, where do we keep that information once we've got it? So that brings me to tip number 3, and one of the things that overwhelms most first-time visitors, and that's transportation. And boy, does Japan have an abundance of different modes of transportation. So tip number 3, let's get to it. Trains are the main method of transportation in Japan. You don't go very far without jumping on either a subway or one of the main train lines. And boy, do they get you from A to B easily. However, if you're new to Japan as a first-time visitor, buying a ticket can be a little bit confusing. It isn't that it's difficult, it's just that trying to work out how much it's going to cost, how to buy the ticket from the vending machine can become a little bit overwhelming. So there's an easy solution to this, and this is buying an IC card. Now, earlier this year, late last year, there was a chip shortage which affected the ability to purchase IC cards, the physical cards in Japan. And believe it or not, after 20 odd trips, we still hadn't bought one. Not because they weren't available, we just hadn't thought to purchase one. On my last visit to Tokyo in December, I decided it was finally time to buy an IC card. And boy, did it make a difference to not only getting around easily, but the amount of time that I spent standing at ticket machines. But instead of getting myself a physical one, I actually opted for a digital one, which is held in an iPhone wallet. This was an absolutely fantastic decision, and I highly recommend it to anybody. Believe it or not, I was able to set up a digital IC card in less than 3 minutes before I even left the comfort of my couch in Australia. If you've got an iPhone, this can be done using the iPhone's wallet app, and I've popped a little tutorial for you to see just how simple it is to actually do. Now, I believe there's an Android version coming soon, but I'm not quite sure when this is going to be available. The benefits are that you can simply turn up at the train station, walk through the turnstiles, swipe your phone or swipe your card. You don't have to figure out what the cost of the ticket is. It automatically does this for you. Another reason to grab one of these cards is that it can be used for more than just your transportation. Convenience stores, taxis, fast food restaurants, and several different versions of cafes all accept the IC card to be used for payment. And what is great is that you can top it up on your phone if you've got a digital one with just a few clicks using a credit card. So you've got your IC card and you're all ready to travel. But how on earth do you work out which train to get on? We've used lots of different apps for transportation when we've travelled around the world, but in Japan, our go-to is definitely Google Maps. There's a few reasons why we choose Google Maps as our preferred app to use, and I'll share these with you today. By entering your start location and your destination, Google Maps will give you a variety of different options to get from A to B, and they'll be in live time. So if you're standing at the train station, you'll be able to see what options are coming up next and what time they'll arrive. It gives you full information on the cost of the tickets and also the travel time. So you can work out whether you want to catch particular transport based on cost or getting there in the shortest amount of time. It also gives you information on departing platforms, the best carriage to get on to be able to transfer from one station to the next. This really does cut down on the amount of time or how far you have to walk. One of the reasons we keep going back to Google Maps in Japan is it shows you the best exit for the destination you're going to. So if you're heading to a particular site and you want to come out at the right exit, and let me tell you, most stations have so many exits it can get confusing, it will tell you exactly what exit will bring you up onto street level in the quickest and easiest time. This is a game saver for when you're travelling in Japan. To cut down on stress while you're on the train, the app also gives you how many stops there are between where you board and where you're getting off, and it also tells you the name of all these stops. So if you're sitting on the train a little anxious, you can check these as you go. Before we move on to tip number 5, which by the way is one of the most helpful tips, I'd like to let you know that in a few weeks' time, Simon and I are heading back over to Japan. If you're interested in seeing our travels, what we eat, what we do, make sure you hit that subscribe button, give us a thumbs up, and in the comments, let me know anything you'd like us to make videos about while we're over there. Thanks for subscribing. So I'll let you in on a little secret. Quite a few years back, Simon and I decided we'd do night school to learn Japanese. Given that we were heading over there a few times every year, we thought we really should learn the language. I hate to say, but when you don't study in between your classes, you really don't retain too much of that information. Yes, we know how to say hello, we know how to ask where the toilets are or to get some water, but other than that, we really don't know a lot. But there's one app that saves our life many a time, particularly when you're trying to read a menu. A tip I'll give you is if you really want the cheap priced food with the best taste, you want to be going to the restaurants where all the locals eat, the ones that might not necessarily have English on the menu. To be able to go to these restaurants, one of the apps that I highly recommend you make sure you've got on your phone is Google Translate. This can mean that when you're in these restaurants, instead of accidentally eating horse meat or whale, you can find out exactly what you're eating before you order. Using Google Translate is simple. Once you've got the app, you can use it to take photos and translate the writing that's in those photos from any language that you set in there. You can hit the speak button and speak into there in your language and have it translated into Japanese so that you can communicate with people that might not know English. So that's our 5 top tips for traveling successfully in Japan. But don't forget, I promised you a bonus one, and here's the bonus one. One of the most popular ways of getting around Japan is to use the bullet trains, the Shinkansens. These can get you from one side of the country to the other in just a matter of hours. These used to be a great option when the JR Pass was available. Unfortunately, last year, the price of the JR Pass pretty much doubled, which meant that it wasn't as cost effective or as big a bargain as it had been. The Shinkansens are still a great way to get around. However, there is a trick to getting your ticket a little bit cheaper and buying it in advance so that you're not worried about not getting a seat. There's a particular app I'm going to recommend as a bonus, and this is called SmartX. The SmartX app allows you to buy your Shinkansen tickets in advance, and when you buy them in advance, you can get a discount. I really hope you found this video helpful, and the apps that I've suggested make your planning for your next trip to Japan that little bit easier. Don't forget that in a few weeks we're heading back to Japan, and if you'd like to follow on our adventures, don't forget to hit the subscribe button. Leave me a comment on the videos you'd like us to make, and we'll get those done for you. Now, if you want a bit of a laugh, check out our last video, which was our first ever YouTube video about the Old English pub in Australia. See you soon.